Sigurd the Mighty had already won. The Scottish earl lay dead, his severed head tied to Sigurd's saddlebow, its buck-tooth jutting out like a last insult. According to the later Orkneyinga Saga, this was the ride home of a conqueror. 80 men hidden on 40 horses, a bargain broken, a battlefield settled, trophies swinging in triumph. Then, somewhere between victory and legend, Sigurd kicked at his horse, brushed his calf against that protruding tooth, and gave history one of its coldest punchlines. The man who had outnumbered his enemy and strapped the proof to his saddle was now being followed home by a dead man's revenge. A warlord who cheated death in battle was losing an argument with a scratch. And if that sounds too perfect to be true, wait until you hear what happened next. Yesterday's Craziness presents The Strangest Deaths from Throughout History, a monthly video celebrating someone's untimely demise in a strange, crazy, or interesting way. Victory had already happened. Sigurd Eysteinsson, Earl of Orkney, was riding home with proof of it swinging from his saddle, the severed head of his enemy, Máel Brigte the buck-toothed. No ambush waited in the heather. No avenger thundered over the hill. According to later Saga tradition, death arrived as a scratch so small it barely qualified as an insult. A protruding tooth nicked his leg. The wound swelled. The conqueror sickened. And one of the hardest men on the northern frontier was, supposedly, finished off by a souvenir. Sigurd lived in the rough, foggy edge where Norse ambition met the Scottish mainland. In the Orkneyinga Saga, written around 1200 about events said to have happened roughly 3 centuries earlier, King Harald Fairhair gives Orkney and Shetland to Ragnvald of More, who passes them to his brother Sigurd. From there, Sigurd becomes one of the formative earls of Norse Orkney, a frontier ruler with sea roads behind him and contested land ahead. The saga credits him with alliance, conquest, and enough force of personality to help carve Norse power into Caithness, Sutherland, Ross, and Moray. His most famous quarrel was with Máel Brigte, a Scottish leader remembered by the nickname Buck-toothed. The later saga tradition says the two men agreed to settle their differences by meeting with 40 men each, which would have been almost civilized by 9th century standards. Sigurd either distrusted treachery or planned it, depending on how charitable you feel. He arrived with 80 men mounted on 40 horses, 2 riders to a beast, hoping distance would hide the arithmetic. But Máel Brigte saw it at once. As the saga has him remark, he could see 2 men's legs on each side of every horse. The agreement was broken before the fighting even began. Then came the kind of victory that should have sealed a reputation. Sigurd's men attacked, some from horseback, some circling behind. Máel Brigte fell. So did his company, and in a flourish of triumph so theatrical it practically begs for consequences, Sigurd and his men fastened the heads of the slain to their saddle straps and rode home boasting. Here the story sharpens into legend. As Sigurd spurred his horse, the calf of his leg struck a tooth jutting from Máel Brigte's severed head. It only scratched him. That is the whole joke and the whole judgment. Not a sword thrust, not a heroic duel. A tiny wound from a dead man already claimed as a trophy. Shortly after, according to the saga, the scratch became swollen and painful, and Sigurd died of it. His son Guthorm succeeded him, ruled only 1 winter, and died childless. Sigurd himself was said to be buried in a mound at Eykjalsbakki. Later local tradition places that broadly near the river Oikul, though no grave has ever been found. What endured instead was the story, the first great Earl of Orkney winning his battle, losing his ending, and leaving behind a dynasty that would rule Orkney and Shetland for centuries. That is what makes this death linger. It may not be strictly true in every detail. Historians treat the earliest saga material as a braid of memory, politics, and myth, not a court transcript. The avenging head may belong partly to Gaelic folklore, but the moral lands either way. Sigurd survived war, deceit, and conquest, then met the oldest medieval truth of all. A trivial wound could become a sentence. If the tale is legend, it is legend with a scalpel's precision. Pride takes a trophy. fate notices the tooth, and death, with impeccable timing, turns victory into the punchline. If you liked what you watched, please like and subscribe. We post interesting and crazy stories from throughout history every Wednesday and Saturday. Yesterday's craziness, because yesterday was crazy too.